What is up, guys? PK here, and in today's video, I'm gonna be telling you guys the story about how I became drunk Spider-Man in Rome. Yep, that's right, full stop. That actually happened. Now, if some of you guys are thinking, ThePartyKnife, what the flippin' hell are you talking about? Well, then you, my good sir, may very well be Canadian. Wait, that wasn't the point. Well, then congratulations, you may very well have a fully functional prefrontal cortex, which, I mean, not gonna lie, considering you're enough of a degenerate to find my content interesting, that is in fact quite an astonishing feat in of itself, and you should be very proud of yourself. But anyways, today I'm gonna tell you quite a private story about an extremely pivotal sort of moment and or period of my life that to some extent I think might have been sort of the snowball that triggered the avalanche of the train crashes that were the downward spiral of the analogy of my life, or the direction it was going in. It was analogous to the direction my life was going in. But make no mistake, I wasn't kidding when I said that the stories were only gonna get crazier. At least for a couple of more videos. Obviously gonna run out at some point. What I'm about to tell you is in fact a very sad story about both depression, suicide, substance abuse, unreciprocated love. It has it all. Like, it might as well have been a screenplay at this point, right? But hopefully it has just enough of that PK mad laddery sprinkle on top to be somewhat funny and enjoyable for you guys. And to tie it all off, hopefully, I can manage to sort of extract the golden nugget of wisdom that is hidden somewhere in the mess that was my life at the time. Now, before we get to the beginning of the story, first, we just have to take a little look a little bit further back to understand sort of the larger context of just how messed up part of my personality, whatever you want to call it, was at the time, and the situation that I sort of found myself in. So let me just tell you a little bit of a very short pre-story. There's part of me that's proud of it, and then there's another part of me that's disgusted by it, where I'm like, I can't figure out how to feel about it. It's a very short story. In gymnasium, right? Which is, you know, a 3-year sort of after elementary school, you have these 3 years, and I was in HGX, which is like a more technical, more science-focused version of the gymnasium. And so essentially, I'm in nerd school. Let me make that very blunt. In one of the nerdy schools in all of Denmark. And after the first 6 months, there was this verbal test, right? So it was an exam, and it would be listed on your sort of exam certificate. But it was kind of a special, slightly weird exam, because it was this. I guess it was an exam in the study of studying, if that makes sense. I'm not sure what the precise English term would be, and we actually had an exam on that, like whether or not we'd been able to teach ourselves how to better learn in the first 6 months, right? But it was an actual graded exam that would be on our actual certificate. And I remember that I had done jack shit in that subject, and I hadn't actually put in the assignment, like the paper that we were supposed to sort of defend at the verbal exam, right? So already there, that's not a great start, right? And I was the second person that morning who was gonna go in with my teacher and an examinator. We're sitting in like the prep room, me and two friends, right? One of which is one of the other degenerates that I'm gonna talk about in the story, and one other guy, right? And essentially, I don't know. I feel so embarrassed I genuinely feel so embarrassed about saying this, but there was a very short window of my life in which, over a couple of parties, I tried something called MDMA, which is essentially ecstasy. And I had, like, I remember so clearly sitting up the whole evening before, right? Because this exam actually mattered. Like, even if the subject matter was, didn't, the grading actually mattered. And I remember being so nervous because I hadn't I didn't have an actual paper sort of to defend, so I was essentially winging the exam. And if you haven't noticed already, I quite often have sleep issues, and that gets exponentially worse when I know I have something really important I have to do the next day. And essentially, in the prep room, with 2 witnesses, I took a bunch of ecstasy right before I went. Not a bunch, like that makes it sound wrong. I snorted 2 lines of MDMA 10 minutes before going into an exam. Now you might be thinking, why in the living shit would you do that, right? That sounds absolutely mad lad. That I don't know how else to put it, right? The logic in my head at the time, and let me make one thing straight. I was in a fucked up place. I'm not that person anymore. But with that said, my logic went something like this. I am freezingly nervous right now because I don't know what I'm supposed to say when I go in there, right? I have my prep feels not prepped, and I'm actually really good at verbal exams, but I felt screwed here because I had nothing to sort of go in there with, right? So I felt, I felt naked, so to speak, right? It was that feeling, and I was afraid that I was gonna lock down at this exam, right? So the logic was, because of what MDMA does, it essentially both floods your brain with endorphins, but it also inhibits the receptors that sort of pick it back up, right? So you're essentially you become very talkative. And I got the equivalent of an A+. I shit you not. I swear to God. Like, it's called, the grading is called 12 in Denmark. And somehow, I don't know how, but I managed to walk out of there with a 12, with the equivalent of an A+, right? Having just snorted 2 lines of MDMA right before going up to the exam, okay? So that's just to explain you guys the setting of the frame of mind I was in, and a year earlier than the beginning of our next story. Now, I do have a couple of pictures to help sort of tell the story. So this is a picture from our 3rd year, and essentially we have this tradition in Denmark where once you're done with the gymnasium, everyone has, their hat where all their grades are in, and then you essentially get driven around in these trucks that are modified for it with like balloons and slogans, and then you get shit wasted, right? And this picture is from that day. You can see I'm standing right here in the background. But we were going on a school trip in the 2nd year, right? So essentially, but we were going on a pre-planned scheduled trip to Rome as a class, right? For a total of 5 days, or 4 nights away from home, essentially, right? So we go to Rome. It's been planned for a long time. This is part of sort of the curriculum when you sign up to the school, and we're in Rome at this sort of little hostel, bed and breakfast, whatever you want to call it. I don't even think it was breakfast, if I'm being perfectly honest. I don't even remember, but essentially this very cheap sort of hotel-like thing where we were 4 people per room in 2 bunk beds in Italy, in Rome, yeah. Now, the first day, nothing really happened. We had an afternoon where we could just, settle in, get comfortable, and then we had 3 days of sort of planned activities. And so we were going to go on a bunch of trips, right? We were going to go see some fermentation plants where they made wine related to like biochemistry that we were supposed to write a report on. And, there are a couple of different things that we were going to go look at from a tourist perspective, but it was related to what we did in school, right? And we were going to do assignments that had to be handed in and so on, based off stuff that we have talked about and learned and experienced in Rome. So that was the idea behind the trip. Now, we go to sleep first evening, wake up the next morning. I remember feeling slightly tired because, as I said, sleeping issues, so maybe I didn't get exactly enough sleep. But I believe at some point in the bus on our way home, right? So I don't remember what we did the first day. A lot of the thing is very blurry for reasons we'll get to momentarily. But my friend Christopher, who's the same guy I mentioned earlier, who's in the prep room with me, and who's the dude I've ever met who smokes the absolute most weed of any person I've ever seen or heard about. Like this guy could smoke Snoop Dogg under the table, and I'm not even exaggerating. Right? We're talking hundreds of grams of hash a month. Okay, I have other funny stories with this guy, but that would be a sidetrack. For the context of this story, he asks me why everyone is like, why he's seeing a bunch of posts on Facebook that says "RIP Summer," rest in peace, Summer. Summer being one of my best friends at the time, person I had known for like many years. Lived in the same city I grew up in, and he was essentially one of my 3 best friends, right? And I was like, he probably got really drunk, it was Monday, he probably got shit wasted in the weekend, had a little bit of a, extra hangover and such. And as you probably figured out, that wasn't the case, right? So we get back, I go and on my Facebook and I start looking, and I just see one message after another, right? From people I know saying "RIP Summer," and I'm like, getting more and more confused. And as I'm just sitting there scrolling, trying to figure out what happened, that's when my phone rings. And it's one of my other friends named Sasha, and I could just hear in her voice immediately, right? She didn't even have to say what it was, and I already knew, oh fuck, this is for real. And so essentially he'd hung himself in a tree the previous evening. So the evening of our arrival, right? Which was obviously extremely shocking and traumatic in a sense, but also it was distant, right? Because no one who was there could relate to what I was feeling or going through, or the person, right? Because no one from my class or anyone, in Italy knew the guy. So it was very hard to so my brain I didn't feel the emotions at the time, right? I was aware of it, but I think my brain just inherently blocked it down because there was no one to talk to about it really. And obviously from that moment on, it was still in my mind, and I obviously did not concentrate a lot the following on the following trips. But essentially that evening, in an attempt, I think, to try and cheer me up, a couple of the guys, we went out and had a couple of drinks and had a little bit of fun, which we were allowed to, just to make that clear. Actually, first, really quickly, earlier in the day, my friend Christopher, because at the time I did smoke weed at the time, I haven't done that for many years either, but at the time I did, but we didn't have any because school trip, right? And it wasn't initially something we planned on doing. So what did we do? We Googled how to get weed in Rome, and it said Central Station was the place with shady dudes selling stuff like that. So we underestimated how far away it was. So it was an hour walk away and an hour back, so 2 hours, right? And we essentially ended up coming back empty-handed because we literally walked for an hour just to go, are there any shady-looking dudes here that look like they, and all the way back. It was stupid when you think about it, but nonetheless, that's going to be important later. But in the evening, so we go out for a couple of drinks, nothing too fancy, but we do. The bottle does start to empty, right? And it takes off a little bit, and me and a couple of friends are walking around in central Rome and essentially just exploring, right? Keep in mind that this is on a workday for the people of Italy, and so in the middle of the night, there aren't a lot of people, oddly enough. And what you can see here is essentially us getting shit wasted in front of the Colosseum. This is us getting even more wasted somewhere in inner Rome, right? And here comes the reason for the title, right? So, soon after this picture was taken, on our way back home, I was very drunk. Very drunk. I'm not gonna lie. I'd been hitting it extra hard for, reasons, right? Related to sort of the very traumatic info I had just received. And I remember my friend, Sebastian, pointing up and going, wait, they're filming us. Just on a random street corner in the middle of Rome. And there's a security cam, right? He's like, oh, they're filming us. I look up, and I don't know what happened in my brain, okay? My brain went, oh, hell no, you're not. I don't know why, okay? I was very drunk. And so immediately, I just start scaling the building. Like, we're talking like 8 meters up vertically. There's like a security cam. And I just start scaling the building, right? Don't believe me? this meme, one of my friends made this meme when we got back. I thought I was drunk, but then I realized I was Spider-Man, which I thought was hilarious. I think the real original picture is, yeah, this is just the original picture, right? This is Sebastian, the dude who pointed it out. And essentially what ended up happening was, and like, make no mistake, if you fall backwards here, right, and hit your head into the pavement, at a minimum, we're talking about a concussion, right? Slightly worse could be a fracture. Worst of all could be death, right? In theory. And yeah, I go from the position that you can see right now. I hang on to the security cam, like, so I grab it and I swing. It snaps, right? I swear to God, and I land on, like, I fall down, right? Because I'm hanging in it. It snaps. I fall all the way down to the ground. Not a scratch. Like, pure dumb luck. Like, I landed on my feet, and sort of just, fell. But like, like a spring, right? Like, not intentional, just straight down. Just landed, got right back up. It's like, didn't get a scratch, and realized in the moment, holy fuck, that could have really got, that was not a good idea. Why did I do that? I don't know. My friend Sebastian grabbed the security cam and he brought it home as a souvenir, I believe. Don't know if he still has it, but I just remember that he had it in his bag in the bus on our way back, right? Which is kind of funny. But so that's why that is essentially the reasoning or rationale behind the title of this video. But I got really drunk, and I remember the next day, not gonna lie, I had a bit of a hangover, and I essentially was even more distant than I already would have been throughout the whole day, right? Throughout the whole the whole trip. So I wasn't really paying attention to anything. I was really in my own thoughts most of the time, right? And so we get to the final evening, the last real evening, right? The last real evening. Then we have another school trip the next day, and then we're leaving the following evening, right? So it's Wednesday. I remember that very specifically. It's Wednesday, and we're leaving Thursday afternoon, right? And so the trip has come to an end, right? We only have the day after, where we're going to the Colosseum as like with the whole class. But we were planning a pub crawl that evening. So me, a couple, I think 2 or 3 other guys, and a bunch of the girls from the class. We've been planning sort of this little tourist pub crawl thing where you start in one place and you go, to I think like 3 different like parties, bars, whatever you want to call it. Obviously, because it was a work day, there weren't that many people other than us. But we were having a great time, right? Going from bar to bar, and essentially at the third, like we were playing like what's it called, that game where they have like ping pong balls and you like. Yeah, we were playing that, and we were, we had our own music again because there was on the third, at least at the third place, I remember there were no one there. It was literally only just us and the people serving booze, and maybe 1 or 2 other people. But it was actually very homely, as I recall it. And I got really drunk, and then I remembered thinking to myself, because there was a girl who was, from in my class that I had a crush on, for whatever you call it, at the time. But I hadn't previously had any intentions of actually telling her that. Let me just make that straight. As much of a chat as you guys all think I am, that is not the case, okay? If there's one thing that can actually make me very, very nervous, it is definitely a girl that I like. But, with that said, in that moment, because I had a crush on her for a while, she was in my class, right? So, obviously... But that's when I realized it didn't matter, because nothing could cause me more emotional pain and distress than I was already in. And that may sound rough, right? But I mean that literally. I realized when I was out for a smoke, and I realized it can't hurt more than it does right now. I found out later that it actually could, not because of this, but we'll get to that as well. But I thought... It can't hurt me, right? It's like there's no universe in which is worse than one of my best friends literally dying, and me not being in any position to even mourn for that. Like, in here, I was suffering, right? So I thought, you know what? Screw this. If I'm ever gonna do it, I'm gonna do it now. So I did it. So I pulled her aside, like asked her if I could talk to her, told her straight to her face how I felt, and the feeling wasn't, wasn't mutual in that way, right? Don't get me wrong. We're still good friends after. Obviously, for me it was slightly awkward. That is what it is, right? Obviously, that didn't improve upon my mood or improve upon how I felt, but that's what it is, right? It is what it is. And so the evening sort of slowly draws to an end, by which I mean it's sort of around 1 o'clock, maybe 1:30, which is fairly early, but again, we had school the next day, right? And we were really drunk. So we thought, this is around an appropriate time where we can still get enough hours of sleep to sort of be functional tomorrow, right? So I call a taxi, and we're on the last day, right? So I remember I had 100 euros left, and I call a taxi. No, we asked the guy to call a taxi. It was the guide dude we had with us to do the pub crawl. He called for an extra large taxi, and the taxi gets here, and we all try to get in, and we realize, oh shit, there's one, like we're one too many to fill up the, to all get in the same taxi. And so we try to convince the taxi driver. I'm like, it's not that far, 10, 15 minutes, but there was no rocking him. Like, he is like, no, it's illegal. He can lose his license. There's no way we're gonna be allowed to have this extra person in the taxi, even for that ride. And I remember, because I was in the back, I was the last person trying to get in. So everyone had gotten in, and then I was standing there like no more room, right? And essentially everyone started, all the girls, they decided, no, okay, let's get back out the taxi. We're just gonna call, we're gonna call someone. If you can't help us, then we're just gonna call 2 other taxis, right? And I'm like, no, it's fine. Don't worry, I got this. And like, what do you mean? I'm like, you guys take this taxi, I'll figure it out, right? I'll figure out a way to get home. And there's like, no, and I insist, okay? Because again, I was in a weird mental state. I think A, I could do something chivalrous, and B, again, I didn't feel like nothing mattered. Literally nothing mattered to me in that moment, right? Because I only had one thing in my head, and that was my friend. And so, like, before they could sort of get out of the taxi, I'm like, I take my 100 euro, give it to the taxi driver, I'm like, here, get them home safely, right? I insisted, essentially, and so they drove off. And so I found myself in Rome at like 1:30 like a.m. on a Wednesday with 3% power on my phone, which I turned off in case I really needed it for an emergency, without a proper jacket, because, it's Rome, it's warm, right? So, but in, when you get really late into the evening, then it's still gonna get cold when you're wearing a t-shirt and a shirt, right? Really drunk. The only idea I have about how to get from where I am to where I need to go was that the taxi drove that direction. That's it, right? So I'm in the middle of Rome. I have no idea where I am. All I know is taxi went that way. No phone, no money, no nothing, in a country where people don't speak English. I mean, maybe that's unfair, but at least 95% they are not going to be anywhere near sort of sufficient at English to actually ask for directions. So I start walking. And I keep walking. And I remember that walk literally felt like an eternity. And I mean an eternity, okay? It's like when if you, for example, imagine in an airport and the flight is delayed, right? It feels so much worse like when they haven't given you a time, right? When it's like, it's delayed by, by X amount, right? So you're waiting for a period of time, but you don't know how long you're gonna wait. That's the worst kind, right? Like sort of the uncertainty amount, where you're like, I have no idea how far I have home. I have no idea how long it's gonna take me. I have no idea which direction to go, if maybe the taxi is gonna turn left up there, right? So I realized that was really dumb when you think about it, and unnecessary. But nonetheless, I could either sit in a corner and, cry for my mama, or I could just start walking. So I started walking. And I kept walking. And I kept walking, hoping that at some point there would just be some dude out on the streets somewhere that I could get a connect, that I could ask. And the occasional car drove by, and I was literally, after 2.5 hours, I was really considering if I should just stand out on the road and block the next car that came past, because that's how lost I felt, right? At this point, I'm like, for all I know, I could be walking, like, not the complete opposite direction, but pretty much, right? Maybe I walked past it, and I was supposed to take a left. Like, I had no idea where I was. I just knew I was in Rome. And I eventually managed, after like 3 hours or something like that, I managed to find one guy on the opposite side of the road and sort of call him in a slightly awkward manner. I was like, hey, dude. And he was like, why are you approaching me like that, right? But I think he understood it eventually when I was like, Central Station. Central Station. That's the only phrase I could utter that he could understand. He couldn't explain anything, but Central Station, you know, and then a hand gesture. Right, because I could never have explained him where I was going. I didn't know the address. I couldn't explain him the hotel name, which he most likely wouldn't know anyways, right? But Central Station, that phrase was understandable, and he could say over there, that direction, right? And I had been to the Central Station. It was the only thing in the entire city of Rome that I knew where it was in relation to my hotel. And so I was able to just follow that until I got to the Central Station. And from there it was another hour's walk back to the hotel. And I get back, it's like, the sun is coming up. We're talking like, it's like 5:30 in the morning or something. I've been walking for way over 4 hours, right? In like, you know, just being in limbo, essentially. I get back, all 4 girls that were on the pub crawl, they're all sleeping in the corridor, on the floor, with nothing but a pillow, with all their clothes on, just in front of the door to my room. I guess just to make sure that I actually got back safely. I guess they were worried and drunk, and they were like, "That we really need to sleep, though." So they were just sleeping on the floor in the corridor, with all our rooms, right? So I woke them up, and they somewhat hazily went into their rooms, and I went to sleep, right? And I vaguely remember someone trying to wake me up at like around 9 o'clock the next morning. But no one was getting me up there. Like, I was already sleep deprived from the previous evenings. This was my second sort of drinking cascade in a small amount of days. And a heavy one of those. Again, you never find relief in the bottom of a bottle. Let me make that straight. And I don't think... And I knew that. But nonetheless, I needed something to get my thoughts off it. If only temporarily until I could get back. And so I had gotten pretty drunk. And I missed the trip the following day. Or at least I was very late. I woke up around 2 o'clock. And I remember just waking up, slightly confused, slightly hungover, with like 4 huge, perfect sunflowers that had just been like put next to my bed. I guess by the girls. As a gesture of some for drawing the shortest straw intentionally, I guess is one way to put it. And so then the following day, got back home, still hadn't shed a tear, and I'll very briefly get past this next part because this next part is not pleasant to talk about. I went home, talked to my mom real quick, went over to some of my friends. A piece like a song came on. That's when it triggered. Boom. I stood up, I walked out to the bathroom, closed the door, and I started bursting into just crying as much as it's, I think, physically possible for my body to cry. And it's the first time I've ever felt physical pain from emotional distress, right? The emotional pain literally became physical pain. My stomach was cramping up, and I was just literally just lying on the floor in foster position. That moment when I realized, because it wasn't until then that it really hit me that, fuck, I'm never gonna see that face again, right? Like, even now, I'm like, I'm really trying hard not to, but, and we walked up to the tree where he had hung himself, and essentially stayed there the whole night. The point was, I became very depressed. Not clinically depressed, but mentally sort of over the course of the following year. And once you are depressed, you're sort of in a loop of depression, right? Because the way neurophysiology works to some extent is, again, when you keep reiterating one thought pattern, that's going to get reinforced in your brain, and it's going to be easier to stay in that thought pattern, right? And I think the lesson to be learned here, because I didn't have to get depressed. Don't get me wrong, everyone was sad for months. Like, every person I met my age who knew what had happened, you could see it in their eyes, right? Everyone loved this guy. Like, he was the nicest dude. the nicest dude. But I think where I went wrong was that for a very long time I didn't allow myself to be happy, to feel happy, right? Because every time I was like, saw a comedian, whatever, right, and I felt joy, I was reminded immediately that, nah, you can't sit here laughing. Not with what has happened, right? Not with one of your best friends having felt so bad that he took his own life. But I actually think I had made myself depressed. Like you can have the symptoms of depression without it being a depression. What I mean by that is when you just lost someone really dear to you, it's only natural to be depressed. That's normal. You're gonna feel depressed because you lost someone you really care about. But I think after grieving for a while, and I'm not saying you should stop grieving, the problem I think that a lot of people would struggle with was you have to allow yourself, despite your grief, you have to allow yourself also to be happy in moments, also to feel joy, to not feel guilty about feeling joy just because this person isn't there. Because without noticing, without realizing it in the moment, I think I set myself up for a very negative thought pattern for a lot of years. A lot of unnecessary suffering. Thankfully something I've managed to reverse engineer. But really the point here being, again, how you frame your thoughts in the present moment really matters, right? And I think what happens to a lot of people, I'm no clinical psychologist, so don't take my word for it here, I'm just speculating. But I can imagine what happens to a lot of people that get depressed, even if they were happy before, perfectly, had good lives, then they're hit by, one of these trains. And then they don't notice how that, perhaps in combination with other factors, actually it's no longer the sorrow from the thing happening, it's the effects of that happening simply having wired the brain into a negative thought pattern, a negative state where you no longer think about things positively. And that's why I think it's so important to force yourself to think positively sometimes, especially when you have all the reason in the world to be sad, to be crying, to be depressed, when everything looks the bleakest and the most gray and the worst. That's when you need to allow yourself to smile. Even if for a moment, even if a fake one, it does matter, because otherwise you're rewiring your brain for sadness. And if you do that for long enough, then you're gonna end up sad for a lot longer than necessary and than you want to, right? Because having fun, smiling, feeling good doesn't minimize, it doesn't take away from, doesn't diminish the value of the life this person had. And I'm sure that's what they would want as well. So really, I think the moral of this whole story is that when things look the darkest, the bleakest, when you're at your lowest, that is when you need to smile. That is when you need to force a smile. And so I'm afraid this story doesn't have a happy ending, really, other than it leading me to where I am today, eventually starting a YouTube channel and, connecting me with you guys. And make no mistakes, I'm the happiest I've ever been in my life. And I think to some degree, I may actually be happier because of it. That may sound strange, but whenever you have a bad day, like if you've been at rock bottom, if you know what that feels like, then you have something to relate any other day to, right? So any shitty day I have, I can think back and I can go, well, sure, today may be not the greatest, but at least it's not that day, right? At least it's not that horrific. And I think that's the right way to think about it, right? And on that slightly more uplifting and slightly less depressing note, I hope you guys enjoyed the video at the very least. If just 1 out of 100 of you guys could resonate with some of what I was saying, then it's been worth making, let me put it that way. Now, make no mistake, this was not an easy story to share for me, and it took me many takes. I think this is at the very least the 4th time I've told the whole story, and it's a long story. Like I had to cut a bunch down just to get it like somewhere close to half an hour. So anyways, I love you guys. You too, Summer. Stay awesome. I know you already are. Peace out.
You serious?